First one is biochemical process of plant nutrition. I'm just going to read that straight through. Boron activates silicon, which carries all other nutrients, starting with calcium, which binds nitrogen to form amino acids, DNA, and promotes cell division. Amino acids form proteins and tag trace minerals, especially magnesium, to form chlorophyll, which transfers energy via phosphorus to carbon to form sugars, which store potassium, carries them. I'm not sure if anybody finds that sufficiently overwhelming.
Wow.
Or highly logical and therefore unavailable. But I'm going to say I think this is pretty close to being true. And for me, it's like so far out of my ability to do anything with. It's not even funny. The one point I do want to make is boron activates silicon, which carries all the nutrients, starting with calcium. So the basic point is you may have all the symptoms of a calcium deficiency, and adding more calcium is not going to solve the problem, right? These are all interrelated, and you have to understand what the causal relationships are to some basic extent. So I'm going to try to emphasize some basic causal relationships to address management practices. Many calcium deficiency symptoms actually are functionally boron deficiency symptoms. I said this last time, I'm fairly sure I'll say it again at least once today. If you are not going to get around to taking a soil test, you mean well, but you're honest with yourself, I'm not going to get a soil test taken. Add boron and sulfur. I'll just about guarantee you need boron and you need sulfur. They're both anions, they both leach. I can pretty much guarantee you a few more. I can pretty much guarantee you manganese. I can pretty much guarantee you cobalt. There's a few other things we can look at, but I mean, absolutely, basically, across the board, sulfur and boron people need. 15 pounds of soluble per acre or 30 pounds of borax. We talked about that last time. There's elemental sulfur if you've got a high pH. There's gypsum if you've got a lower pH. Say 50 pounds of elemental sulfur per acre. These things are critical. They're absolutely critical for biochemical function, and oftentimes are just limiting factors. And you're going to be hitting the same wall every single year until you address these mineral deficiencies. So, that all being said, calcium, I'll start with calcium. Often calcium shortages show up in tandem with other shortages, most commonly boron and silicon, for the reason I just said. Stem and leaf strength and ability to flex and bend are correlated with calcium. So, if the leaves break off easily, that's a calcium deficiency. Strong cell walls, which correlates to fungal resistance. You can't have fungal resistance without good calcium levels. If you have fungal susceptibility, if you have powdery mildew or downy mildew or any of those kinds of things, that means not enough calcium in your leaves. Roundness of stem does have good calcium levels. Leaves that have a wrinkled appearance or may defoliate correlates with a calcium deficiency. Has anybody ever seen, I like to use the example of green chard. Anybody ever grown green chard? Four-hook giant green chard. First thing in the spring, June-ish, it's coming out, just the first leaves, and there's these big, broad, shiny leaves, and then sometime around July they get wrinkly.
Right.
You notice that?
Yeah.
So they were flat,
Right.
and now they're wrinkly. That means you had enough calcium, and now you don't.
Huh.
When leaves get a wrinkled appearance, that correlates with a functional calcium deficiency, oftentimes correlating with boron, not always. Corn leaves, oftentimes you see corn, there's a little ruffle from the corn leaves. Ever see that? Little ruffle, little bit, all went up all the way up and down one side and down the other. That ruffling is a calcium deficiency symptom. I've got written poorly developed root hairs. That's not something you notice unless you dig up your plants, which most people don't do. But I talked about how calcium is critical in developing root systems, and that's why you want to have that rock phosphate in there early. Adequate calcium correlates to the same leaf size across the plant. Who has seen a cucumber plant or a winter squash plant with big broad leaves at the base of the plant? They get smaller and smaller and smaller as you proceed down the plant. Right? They should not do that. That is a sign of the plant not being well grounded. It does not have access to what it needs to maintain high levels of vigor and vitality. You would like to see those leaves as big at the bottom of the plant as they are as the edge of the plant. Again, that oftentimes correlates with boron. Silicon. Vine crops become resistant to powdery mildew with sufficient silicon. Especially, I find the cucumber family plants, especially the hybrids. If you use hybrid summer squash, hybrid zucchini, hybrid cucumbers, and my experience is they have generally a high level of susceptibility to powdery mildew and downy mildew. I had this experience this year. I said I had various sources of seedlings and seed, and I got some, I think it was multi-pick yellow squash, which is a classic sort of hybrid variety from a friend of mine, seedlings, and put them in. And they were the only ones that got taken out by powdery mildew. I had, 6 different varieties of yellow squash, and the multi-pick were the ones that, they came in strong, they, produced strong for like 3 weeks and then just crashed. And my crooknecks were going through October. Just kept on trucking, kept on putting out fruit, getting bigger and bigger and bushier and bushier. My experience is that those hybrids generally are much more susceptible. And I think a large part of it is because their root systems are just not sufficient to actually pull those nutrients from the environment. What's a good organic, natural, plant-based source of silicon? Anybody know this one?
Rockhouse.
No, organic, as in an organic construct, as in carbon compounds. Horsetail. Equisetum. Horsetail is a weed, quote unquote. Dried down, it's like 90% silicon by weight. It's ridiculous. This is really ancient plant. It's used by the Nen people for one of their preparations. Horsetail tea is a really wonderful silicon. You can just take horsetail, the plant horsetail, dunk it in a bucket of water for a few days, let it ferment, and then put it in a sprayer or put it in water into the ground. You can really get a nice silicon, nice bioavailable form of silicon to the plant. Certainly rock dust is a good source of silicon, but that takes a little more time to become bioavailable in season. Okay. H5, boron. Boron facilitates carbohydrate transport down to the roots and nutrients up to the leaves. So remember that picture over there with the leaves making sugar, injecting the sugar down into the soil? Sugar is that carbohydrate. Boron facilitates carbohydrate transport down to the roots and nutrients up to the leaves. If you don't have boron present, you can't get the sugar dropped down into the roots and you can't get the nutrients transferred back up to the leaves. So that basically, as far as I'm concerned, correlates with a case of constipation. Everything's backed up, nothing's moving. And you get constipation for a couple of weeks and you're going to start to fall apart. So really, boron is one of those really critical trace elements. We have it actually at the top of the list of that order of elements moving. Most people have not addressed boron deficiencies. Boron is an anion. We need 3 parts per million, which is 6 pounds per acre. I really would strongly recommend application of boron, regardless of a soil test, unless you're in a hoop house or you've applied it recently. Pretty categorically around here. I think you're going to get a lot of systemic benefits. The way you test to see if you've got a boron deficiency, so what happens in the leaf is the brick shooting does go up and down on a daily basis. So this is 7 a.m. This is 3 p.m. This may be a brick reading of 4. This is a brick reading of 6. Or something. You're going to go up or down a point or 2 during the day. Overnight, the plant is taking all of its sugars and injecting them into the soil. Right? Just dropping them into the soil. During the day, sunlight is being captured and photosynthesis is occurring and sugars are being complexed. So things are being built into the leaf during the day and they're being dropped down to the root during the night. And so you should see fewer compounds in the leaf at 7 a.m. than you see at 3 p.m. That's what you should see. If you don't, if you see your bricks reading at 5 at 7 a.m. and 5 at 3 p.m., that means the plant's got constipation. Whatever it's got in the leaf can't get down. It's not modulating up and down. So if you have any suspicions that you're seeing calcium deficiency signs, all the things we talk about with calcium, leaf size and all that kind of stuff, check the bricks in the morning and the afternoon. If you don't see a change of at least a point, you probably have boron deficiency. And adding all the calcium in the world is not going to solve the calcium availability issue. You need to add boron into the system.